There's a silent, unseen world within each of us, a vast landscape of thoughts, memories, and emotions that we navigate every single day. But beneath the surface, far deeper than our conscious mind dares to venture, lies a shadowy realm where our most primal anxieties reside. It's a place our brain, in its infinite wisdom and sometimes baffling complexity, chooses to conceal, to shield from our waking awareness. Have you ever felt that unsettling tremor of dread, that inexplicable resistance to a path you know is right, or that sudden, cold wave of panic without a clear trigger? What if I told you these aren't random glitches, but echoes from a hidden vault, a carefully guarded chamber where your brain keeps your darkest fears locked away? The question isn't if they exist, but why they're kept secret, and what happens when they inevitably begin to leak out into the light of day. Imagine your brain not just as an organ, but as an ancient, vigilant guardian. Its primary directive, its very essence, is to protect you, to ensure your survival and well-being. From the moment we draw our first breath, this internal sentinel begins cataloging threats, learning patterns, and building defenses. In a world teeming with potential dangers, saber-toothed tigers in ancient times, the emotional minefields of modern life today, fear became an invaluable compass, a biological alarm system designed to jolt us into action or freeze us into safety. But some fears, some truths about ourselves or the world, are deemed too potent, too disruptive to be handled directly by our conscious mind. It's like a parent hiding sharp objects from a child, believing they're acting in the child's best interest, even if that child might one day need to learn how to handle those very tools. The brain, in its protective zeal, decides that certain revelations, certain confrontations with our deepest insecurities would be too overwhelming, too paralyzing to face head-on. So, it tucks them away, meticulously burying them beneath layers of distraction, rationalization, and the sheer momentum of daily living. These aren't the simple, tangible fears, mind you. We're not talking about a fear of spiders or heights, though those too have their roots in our primitive wiring. No, the fears our brain truly hides are far more insidious, far more existential. They are the unspoken dread of inadequacy, the terrifying possibility of utter solitude, the chilling certainty of our own mortality, or the profound fear of failing to live up to our own potential. Or, perhaps even worse, the fear of succeeding and losing ourselves in the process. These are the narratives that, if allowed to play out unchecked in our conscious mind, could cripple our ambition, shatter our confidence, or force us to confront uncomfortable truths about who we are and what we truly want. They are the cracks in our carefully constructed self-image, the vulnerabilities that threaten to expose the fragile core of our identity. And so, the brain, ever the architect of our reality, constructs elaborate internal mechanisms to keep these fears sequestered, out of sight, out of mind. One of its most cunning strategies is repression. It's not an active, deliberate decision to forget something, but rather a subconscious process where traumatic memories or threatening impulses are banished from conscious awareness. Think of a deep-sea diver pushing a heavy, buoyant object down into the murky depths, hoping it will stay there forever. But gravity, or in this case, the emotional weight of the fear, always finds a way to assert itself. These repressed fears don't simply vanish. They morph. They whisper. They manifest in subtle, often perplexing ways. They might appear as inexplicable anxiety attacks that ambush you in moments of peace, or as recurring nightmares that leave you feeling drained and disturbed, even if you can't recall the specific content upon waking. Perhaps they fuel a persistent feeling of being not enough, driving you to achieve relentlessly, yet never truly feeling satisfied. They are the phantom limbs of our psyche, absent yet undeniably present, causing discomfort and pain in places we can't quite pinpoint. Consider the fear of abandonment. For many, it's a primal wound, perhaps rooted in early childhood experiences, a fleeting moment of perceived neglect, or a profound loss. The conscious mind might rationalize it away, asserting independence and self-sufficiency. But deep down, the brain, remembering the pain, the vulnerability, the existential threat of being alone, might hide this fear so effectively that it manifests as a desperate need for external validation, an inability to trust intimacy, or a pattern of pushing people away before they can leave. The conscious brain sees a confident, self-reliant individual, while the hidden fear subtly dictates every relational decision, every self-sabotaging act. It's a cruel irony. The very mechanism designed to protect us from pain often propels us into repeated cycles of the very thing we dread. Another potent strategy is denial. While repression pushes things out of awareness, denial actively refuses to acknowledge a reality that is too painful or threatening. That could never happen to me, we tell ourselves, even as the evidence mounts. I'm not afraid of that, we assert, even as our body language and behavior scream otherwise. This isn't just about ignoring facts. It's about a profound, self-protective delusion that allows us to maintain a sense of control and stability in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. The brain, in its protective capacity, understands that acknowledging certain truths, the fragility of life, the limitations of our abilities, the inevitability of loss, could lead to an existential crisis too profound to navigate in the daily grind. So, it builds a fortress of unreality, a comforting narrative that keeps the harsh edges of truth at bay, preserving our internal equilibrium, albeit at a significant long-term cost. The question then arises, what are these darkest fears that our brain so carefully orchestrates into hiding? They are not universal in their specifics, but universal in their profound impact. For one, it might be the fear of insignificance, the terrifying thought that our lives don't matter, that our contributions are negligible, and that we will ultimately be forgotten. This fear can drive incredible ambition and achievement, but it can also manifest as chronic anxiety about public perception, an inability to enjoy personal successes, or a constant need for external validation. The brain tries to shield us from this existential void by prompting us to constantly do and achieve, hoping that outward accomplishments will quell the inner void, never realizing it's a fear it itself is keeping secret. For another, it could be the fear of losing control, not just over external circumstances, but over ourselves. The idea that our emotions could overwhelm us, that our impulses could dictate our actions, or that mental faculties could degrade, is deeply unsettling. The brain often hides this by fostering an illusion of perfect control, leading to rigidity, perfectionism, or an intense aversion to spontaneity. When situations inevitably arise that are beyond our control, the hidden fear erupts, often as a disproportionate panic attack or a deep, unsettling sense of helplessness, precisely because our internal guardian has not prepared us for such an eventuality, instead choosing to hide the very possibility. The very act of living means navigating uncertainty, and our brains are constantly making split-second decisions to protect us. But sometimes, in its zeal to keep us safe and comfortable, it deprives us of the very tools we need to truly thrive: awareness, resilience, and the courage to confront our own shadows. It's like being given a map with crucial landmarks deliberately blurred out, leaving us to wander through certain territories with a nagging sense of unease, unable to fully understand the obstacles or the hidden pathways to true liberation. The brain's rationale is simple. Ignorance is bliss, or at least, ignorance prevents immediate paralysis. But the cost, Oh, the cost is immeasurable. When these deepest, hidden fears are not addressed, they don't simply dissipate. Instead, they become the silent architects of our lives, dictating choices we aren't even aware we're making. They can sabotage relationships, stifling intimacy out of a fear of vulnerability. They can derail careers, holding us back from opportunities that push us beyond our perceived limits, lest we expose our hidden inadequacy. They can fuel chronic anxiety, leaving us in a perpetual state of low-grade dread without a clear cause. We might find ourselves engaging in patterns of self-sabotage, addiction, or avoidance, all in a subconscious effort to either numb the hidden fear or to prove its validity. The irony, of course, is that the brain, in its attempt to protect us, often traps us in a cycle of the very pain it sought to prevent. And so, the brain, this magnificent and mysterious organ, in its unwavering mission to preserve our internal harmony, inadvertently creates a kind of psychological pressure cooker. The fears are sealed away, but the steam, the raw emotional energy, still builds up. It doesn't disappear. It simply seeks alternative outlets, manifesting as chronic stress, unexplained fatigue, or even physical ailments. Our body, often a more honest messenger than our conscious mind, begins to register the strain of carrying these hidden burdens. A persistent knot in the stomach, a tightening in the chest, restless nights. These can be the subtle signals, the urgent whispers from our subconscious, trying to alert us to the unaddressed truths simmering beneath the surface. It's an internal cry for attention, a plea to acknowledge the very things our brain has worked so hard to keep from us. But how do these hidden fears, these carefully guarded secrets, ever come to light? Often, it's not a gentle unveiling, but rather an abrupt and sometimes painful breach. A significant life event, a loss, a major life transition, a confrontation with our own mortality can act as a psychological earthquake, shaking the foundations of our denial and repression. In these moments of profound vulnerability, the carefully constructed walls begin to crack, and the hidden fears, once meticulously buried, start to seep into our conscious awareness. It's like a dam bursting. The initial deluge can feel overwhelming, terrifying even, as we are suddenly confronted with anxieties and insecurities we believed were long gone, or perhaps never even existed. This is why periods of intense stress or change often precede a deeper self-awareness, because the brain's usual defenses are temporarily weakened, allowing buried truths to surface. Consider the person who has always presented an impenetrable facade of strength and independence. Their brain, perhaps fearing vulnerability or rejection, has hidden a profound fear of weakness. They might scoff at the idea of needing help, always taking on too much, refusing to delegate. But then, a serious illness strikes, or a sudden, catastrophic financial setback occurs, forcing them into a position of absolute dependency. The carefully guarded fear of weakness suddenly erupts, not just as an intellectual understanding, but as a visceral, gut-wrenching experience. They might initially lash out, feel intense shame, or withdraw completely, not just from the external situation, but from the painful truth that their brain had so diligently protected them from. It's in these crucible moments that the veil is lifted, however painfully, revealing the hidden psychological architecture that has been silently shaping their entire existence. And what about the phenomenon of projection? Our brain, in its continued effort to keep certain fears hidden, often casts them onto others. If we have a deeply repressed fear of being inadequate or flawed, we might find ourselves consistently criticizing others for their perceived flaws, or constantly judging their perceived weaknesses. It's easier to see the imperfection in someone else than to confront the uncomfortable truth within ourselves. The brain uses this clever trick to deflect the spotlight, to keep the focus outward, away from the internal vault of our own insecurities. We become hypersensitive to traits in others that mirror our own hidden anxieties, often reacting with disproportionate anger or discomfort, precisely because those traits are echoing the very things our brain is trying to keep secret from us. So, the journey towards understanding why your brain hides your darkest fears is not just an intellectual exercise. It is an act of courage, an invitation to a deeper, more authentic relationship with yourself. It's about learning to listen to those whispers of anxiety, to those subtle resistances, not as flaws to be suppressed, but as signposts pointing towards the hidden truths within. It's about recognizing that the discomfort we feel when confronted with certain situations or ideas might not just be external friction, but the internal grinding of our conscious mind against the very defenses our brain has erected to protect us. The crucial question then becomes, if our brain hides these fears to protect us, is it inherently wrong to bring them to light? Not necessarily. The brain's mechanisms are primal, often designed for a world far simpler and more dangerous than our current one. While immediate avoidance might have been a survival strategy in the face of a physical threat, in the complex tapestry of modern human experience, prolonged avoidance of emotional truths can become a greater threat to our well-being and growth. By keeping these fears hidden, the brain prevents us from developing the very tools and resilience we need to navigate them effectively. It's like keeping a child from falling, only to have them never learn how to get back up. The true liberation comes not from eradicating fear entirely, for fear, in its healthy form, is a vital warning system, but from understanding its source, from bringing the hidden into the light of awareness. It's about consciously stepping into the shadow, not to be consumed by it, but to illuminate it with the lamp of self-knowledge. When we uncover a hidden fear, we gain agency. We can then choose how to respond, rather than being unconsciously dictated by it. We can begin to dismantle the elaborate defense mechanisms that once served a purpose, but now only limit our potential. We can transform these once paralyzing anxieties into sources of profound understanding, compassion for ourselves, and genuine growth. This journey is not without its challenges. It requires patience, introspection, and sometimes the gentle guidance of others. It means sitting with discomfort, allowing ourselves to feel the raw edges of vulnerability, and accepting that the self we thought we knew might be far more complex, more fragile, and ultimately more magnificent than we ever imagined. It means acknowledging that our brain, in its powerful protective instinct, sometimes errs on the side of overprotection, holding us back from the very experiences that would lead to our deepest fulfillment. So, the next time you feel that inexplicable unease, that nagging doubt, or that sudden jolt of panic, pause. Don't immediately push it away. Instead, ask yourself, what is my brain trying to tell me? What truth is it struggling to conceal? What hidden fear, buried deep beneath the layers of my conscious mind, is trying to find its way to the surface? For within those darkest fears lies not just pain, but the profound potential for self-discovery, for breaking free from the unseen chains that bind us, and for finally embracing the fullness of who we are, with all our magnificent complexities, vulnerabilities, and untold strengths. The answers, as always, reside within. You are absolutely right. My apologies for the language mix-up. Let's continue this immersive journey, in English, picking up exactly where we left off, delving deeper into the profound process of becoming the master of our own inner landscape. So, we find ourselves at the precipice of understanding, learning to become the guide for ourselves through the labyrinth of the mind, instead of a blindly led wanderer. This journey is not merely about identifying the fears. It's about a profound act of reparenting our own psyche, gently reassuring our brain that the dangers it perceives are no longer as life-threatening as they once were, or that we now possess the capacity to face them with resilience. It's a painstaking process of building trust with our own subconscious, one where empathy for our internal guardian replaces frustration and self-judgment. The brain, after all, has only ever sought to protect us, even if its methods have sometimes become outdated or counterproductive in the complexities of adult life. Consider the pervasive fear of failure, often buried so deep it manifests as chronic procrastination or a refusal to even try something new. Our brain, seeking to shield us from the pain of perceived inadequacy, might subtly whisper doubts, create mental blocks, or amplify the perceived difficulty of a task. It's not actively trying to harm us, but rather to prevent the sting of disappointment, the blow to our self-esteem that a failed attempt might bring. Yet, by avoiding the possibility of failure, we also inadvertently forfeit the chance for growth, for learning, for the profound satisfaction that comes from pushing past our perceived limits. The hidden fear becomes a self-imposed cage, a beautifully gilded prison where we are safe, yes, but also utterly stagnant. The key to unlocking this cage isn't brute force, but gentle inquiry. What is the true cost of not trying? What am I truly afraid of losing? This leads us to the critical role of vulnerability. The brain, in its ancient wisdom, often equates vulnerability with weakness, with exposure to harm. To reveal a hidden fear, to acknowledge an insecurity, feels like opening ourselves up to attack. Yet, paradoxically, it is in these moments of conscious vulnerability that true strength and authentic connection are forged. When we dare to bring a hidden fear into the light, perhaps by sharing it with a trusted friend, a therapist, or even just acknowledging it in our private thoughts, we begin to disarm its power. The fear, once a monstrous shadow in the dark, often shrinks to a manageable size when exposed to the light of shared understanding and acceptance. The act of voicing it, of giving it a name, strips away much of its mystique and its paralyzing grip. We discover that vulnerability isn't a flaw, but a gateway to a deeper, more human experience, allowing others to truly see us, and more importantly, allowing us to truly see ourselves. The impact of these hidden fears extends far beyond our individual experience, casting long shadows over our relationships. An unacknowledged fear of intimacy, perhaps rooted in a past betrayal or the subconscious dread of losing oneself in another, can manifest as a series of short-lived relationships, a tendency to push people away when they get too close, or a chronic difficulty in forming deep emotional bonds. Our brain, trying to protect us from potential heartbreak, builds walls that ultimately keep out love and connection, leaving us feeling isolated despite our conscious desire for closeness. Similarly, a hidden fear of conflict might lead us to be overly agreeable, suppressing our own needs and opinions until resentment boils over, destroying the very harmony we so desperately tried to maintain. These are the intricate, often tragic, dance steps choreographed by our hidden fears, silently sabotaging the very things we consciously strive for. Breaking free from these patterns requires an act of radical self-honesty, a willingness to look at the recurring dramas in our lives and ask, what internal fear is trying to play out here? What truth about myself am I unwilling to face that is leading to this repeated outcome? It's a moment of profound recognition, often uncomfortable, but incredibly liberating. It's the realization that the external struggles we face are often mirrors reflecting the internal battles our brain has been waging on our behalf, in its well-intentioned but misguided attempt to keep us safe. Ultimately, the journey to confront and integrate our darkest fears is an act of reclaiming control, not in the sense of dominating our emotions, but in the sense of consciously choosing how we respond to them. It's moving from a reactive existence, where our actions are dictated by unseen anxieties, to a proactive one, where we consciously choose our path, even when fear is present. This doesn't mean fear disappears. It means fear becomes a signal, a data point, rather than a master. We learn to sit with the discomfort, to acknowledge the ancient warnings, and then to make a conscious decision based on our values and aspirations, rather than merely retreating to the perceived safety of the familiar and the unexplored. The brain might still whisper its cautions, but we, the conscious navigators, now have the wisdom and courage to discern which warnings are still relevant and which are merely echoes of a past that no longer serves us. And so, as we reclaim this inner territory, bringing light to the corners our brain once deemed too dark, something truly transformative begins to happen. We move beyond merely identifying these hidden fears. We begin the profound process of integration. This isn't about eradicating fear, for fear, in its healthy form, remains a vital part of our human operating system, a primal warning signal that protects us from genuine harm. Instead, integration means welcoming these once rejected parts of ourselves back into the whole, understanding their origins, acknowledging their protective intent, and then consciously choosing how we want them to influence our lives moving forward. It's like befriending a vigilant but overly anxious guard dog. You don't banish it, but you teach it to discern real threats from imagined ones, allowing it to relax and trust your judgment. The benefit of this integration is not just a reduction in anxiety, it's a profound expansion of our capacity for life. When we are no longer unconsciously driven by these hidden fears, a tremendous amount of mental and emotional energy is freed up. Imagine the mental resources our brain expends in maintaining those elaborate systems of repression, denial, and rationalization. When those systems are gently dismantled, that energy becomes available for creativity, for deeper connection, for more courageous pursuits, and for a more authentic expression of who we truly are. It's like removing heavy psychological shackles we didn't even know we were wearing, suddenly allowing us to move with greater ease, agility, and joy. This newfound freedom often manifests in several powerful ways. Firstly, we develop a far greater sense of resilience when we have consciously faced our deepest fears, even in the quiet sanctuary of our own mind. We build an internal fortitude that prepares us for external challenges. Life will inevitably bring pain, loss, and uncertainty. But instead of being blindsided and overwhelmed by these events because they trigger a long-hidden, unexamined fear, we can meet them with a steady gaze. We know that we possess the inner resources to navigate discomfort because we have already practiced doing so with our own internal landscape. The once feared unknowns become opportunities for demonstrating our newfound strength. Secondly, our relationships deepen exponentially. When we are no longer operating from a place of hidden fear, be it fear of abandonment, rejection, or vulnerability, we can engage with others from a place of genuine authenticity and presence. We become less reactive to perceived slights, more open to true intimacy, and more capable of setting healthy boundaries, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Others sense this shift. They feel the genuine warmth and trust that emanates from someone who has bravely looked into their own shadows and emerged more whole. The walls come down, not because we've forced them, but because they are no longer needed to guard secrets. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, we cultivate a profound sense of self-compassion. The journey into our hidden fears can be messy, revealing parts of ourselves we might not like. But it is precisely in this vulnerable exploration that we learn to extend kindness and understanding to our own struggles. We realize that our anxieties and defense mechanisms were not flaws, but attempts at self-protection. This understanding fosters a gentle acceptance, allowing us to embrace our imperfections, our past mistakes, and our ongoing human journey with greater patience and less harsh self-criticism. This self-compassion then extends outward, allowing us to interact with the world and others from a place of greater empathy and wisdom. The ultimate lesson, then, in understanding why your brain hides your darkest fears, is not to villainize this intricate, powerful organ, but to understand its profound evolutionary purpose. It has been trying to keep us safe, to protect us from what it perceived as existential threats. But our conscious awareness, our capacity for reflection, and our innate drive for growth now allow us to evolve beyond these primal directives. We are no longer solely dependent on its ancient, often overprotective mechanisms. We can now choose to be active participants in our own psychological liberation, becoming conscious co-creators of our inner reality. This is not a destination, but a lifelong practice. The journey of self-discovery is continuous, and new fears, new challenges will inevitably arise. But once we have learned the language of our hidden depths, once we have practiced the art of gentle inquiry and compassionate integration, we gain a compass that will guide us through any internal storm. We learn to trust the wisdom that emerges from confronting discomfort, knowing that on the other side of every hidden fear lies not just peace, but a truer, richer, and more expansive version of ourselves, waiting to be fully lived. Embrace the shadow, for within it lies the greatest light.